Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-ay. My, oh my, what a busy day. If I say it's a wonderful day, I'll curse myself. Past 48 hours has been hellish. That's okay. Right, at least I got a roof over my head and I'm not starving, as is blatantly obvious, right? Yeah, certainly goes. So, yep. Not going to take it with you, right? I love when people like want power and they try to build up things. They think they're going to take it with them to the afterlife or something. Nobody should ever want control over another people, but that's a matter for another video. I was talking about this specifically in the community section, specifically the geometry of the hyperboloid. Here's a little hyperboloid, by the way, an hourglass shape. Now, this isn't a true hyperboloid, because there still is a little funnel in the section from where the sand actually falls from there to there. The center of which of a true hyperboloidal geometry, which is purely theoretical because it would be connected, there's nothing there. We actually have mass and magnitude, and we have sand passing over here. Same as on a clock. Yeah, you can look at the hands, the hour hand on this, the minute hand passing around, but if the clock were still working and we just rip the hands off the clock, we would never know the time. Time is necessitatively, of course, only those extensions. We actually have a little battery that powers the clock hands, and they move off of that little spindle, and the arms extend out since we could visually see it. The loss of energy or inertia of that battery as the battery slowly drains as it turns those respective spindles that control the minute hand and the hour hand is really no different than the agathon of the absolute, i.e. the extrinsic principle of the agathon of the absolute, which is the extrinsic nature no different than light. And the extrinsic nature of light, of course, is illumination. So we're talking about the, and I find it humorous when people say sacred geometry, or they'll say golden ratio. They say these things, but they don't mean anything. It's like, what do you mean when you say sacred? What about it is sacred? Well, I don't know. It's just, we see it in nature. What's golden about the golden ratio? Well, it's just like beautiful stuff we see in nature. It's like, well, that's a nice description, but it doesn't explain anything, because descriptions are not explanations. We know it's beautiful, a sunflower, but when you say sacred geometry or golden ratio, you're not elevating anybody's mind whatsoever. The truth, of course, is be a correct explanation, a correct understanding. So, respectively, of course, we have the conjugate geometry of the entire universe, which is the hyperboloid and the torus. The torus, of course, is the donut shape, and the hyperboloid is the hourglass shape, and they're in the negative image of one another. The negative image of a hyperboloid is a torus, negative image of torus is a hyperboloid. Interestingly enough, and without coincidence, of course, the superimposition of both is a sphere. I should have brought my apple out and actually cut it down the middle, but we could actually talk about a theoretical Earth, and if we were able to get inside of a capsule and go to the center of the Earth, there would be no gravity. The center of something, there should be a concentration of that. If we're at the center of anything, we usually find the most of that. Yeah, at the center of palm trees in South Florida, you know, there should be the most palm trees, right? The further out you go, there's less of it. So when you go more towards where palm trees are, analogously, you know, you see a lot more palm trees. My house down in Fort Myers is called the City of Palms. When you get to Kentucky, you don't really see many palm trees. So I expect to see more of them the further I go to the south. But the center of gravity, there is no gravity. There's a hole, this field phenomena that we call gravity. Center of a hyperboloid, i.e. of the dielectric geometry of increasing inertia and acceleration. By the way, a vortex, and people love endlessly to talk about a vortex. Well, a vortex is just a half a donut, a half a hyperboloid. We see donuts in the sky vis-a-vis tornadoes and hurricanes, of course. This is just half of a torus. Yeah. So the nothing where everything is, i.e. the center of a sphere, the center of a torus, i.e. the center of a donut. I mean, don't take the donut too seriously, because people will say, I eat donut holes. Like, yeah, that's where they punch the center out to actually create a donut. But the donut itself, there's nothing there. I don't know if as a kid, I haven't had a donut in like 20 years. You eat a donut, it's like, well, you have to eat around it. There's nothing in the center of a donut. Yeah, and then we of course get those cream-filled Danishes that have cream. And I haven't had one of those in 30 years. I know I'm fat. That's not a donut though. That's like a Danish where they had cream filling or jelly filling. You remember those that like had 1,000,000,000 calories? They'd basically kill you if I like ate one of those today. But the center of a torus or a donut, there's absolutely nothing. The center of a hyperboloid, there's absolutely nothing. I just got done making a video, and I'll post that tomorrow, about Nikola Tesla's accurate ether metaphysics, what he understood the ether to be. And I point out to people there's 1,000,000 ideas about God or the absolute, most of which are wrong. There's 1,000,000 ideas about the soul, most of which are wrong, of course. And there are 1,000,000, even thousands of years ago, countless hundreds of different theories of the ether. But Nikola Tesla, just like the relativists and just like those that are into quantum, based his understanding of the ether upon accurate denotation, description, and explanation of the nature of light. The relativists got light wrong, and they still do. They think it's an emission, a transmission, and a speed, and all of those things are incorrect. Nikola Tesla asked himself the simple question, how could something as simple as a candle be emitting something at the same speed as the sun, something of infinite power versus a candle of basically no power at all? I mean, candle power is essentially nothing. What this will tell you if you actually employ retroduction, which Nikola Tesla did, because his favorite author is Roger Boskevich, Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis. You say, well, if a candle and the sun are producing this field phenomena, i.e. light, at the same called speed, which is not a speed at all, rather hysteresis or rate of induction of the ether, i.e. the elasticity at which the occurrence occurs, this tells you it's based upon the medium rather than the source, which is incredibly, incredibly important. What does this actually tell us about nature? That we have the sphere and, of course, lowest pressure mediation of mutual mass acceleration, i.e. when things actually mutually accelerate, never towards one another. That's also, too, another rare point. The same thing on a black hole. We have a supermass with no magnitude, but humanity, just the same fallacy of magnetic attraction, which doesn't occur at all. All human beings suffer the fallacy that when the masses accelerate towards one another, that these masses, under the spell of gravity, which no branch of science, by their own admission, I will give them credit for, they admit they have no idea what gravity is. Visually, an accurate observation will show you that they're accelerating towards one another, but they're not. They're actually, and you can see this underneath the supercell. I have countless hundreds of videos on this. When these magnets are accelerating, not towards each other, but rather towards a null pressure point between the two. The center of this acceleration, which is no different than gravity. So-called gravity, so-called magnetic attraction, so-called electrostatic cling are all one and the same thing. They're only differentiated by their attributional states, the center of which there is nothing. You can actually see this nothing, but not nihil ex nihil, as the premise of from nothing comes nothing. Rather, not a thing, meaning not phenomena. What is not phenomena is noumena, we could say metaphysics in short, are accelerating towards this null point. Why is it that you assume, and this is the case, not my idea or theory or belief or feeling, the center of gravity, there is no gravity. At the center of a hyperboloid, a true hyperboloid, it's kind of close. Center of a hyperboloid, there is nothing, as in meaning not nihilo, nothing in an absolutist sense, which is purely conceptual, and Mother Nature has no idea what nothing is, because there's no such thing as nothing. Something is void of something else. By nothing, I mean not a thing, i.e. not phenomena. There's nothing there. Same is the case with the torus, or the donut. There is nothing in the middle. Magnets and mutual mass acceleration in the case of gravity are not accelerating towards one another. They're accelerating towards nothing. This tells you everything about the ether. This tells you everything about fields. Why do you think that there's nothing at the center of all fascinating phenomena? Capacitance. Smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. At the highest capacitance, we would have inertia. Just slightly less than pure inertia. And the inertia is a true denotation, the original denotation, by the way, for ether. Pure potential without any loss of energy, which would have, definitionally, no mass or magnitude, no Cartesian coordinate, in other words, no XYZ coordinate where it could be seen, touched, objectively measured, put underneath the microscope, described in any attributional state whatsoever. What would be true light in this analogy? It would be not turning on the light switch. Say you have a pure battery with zero loss, which of course doesn't exist. A pure battery with zero loss. What would true light be? It would not be the illumination like this light illuminating my bald, shiny head right now. That is illumination. It would be complete and total darkness. Pure inertia with no energy loss. The principle, not the attribute. Every field state in the universe, whether it be the hyperboloid, whether it be the torus, whether it be the sphere, whether it be incorrect observation from mutual mass acceleration or so-called magnetic attraction, well, they're accelerating towards one another. No, they're not. They're actually accelerating towards nothing. Or more accurate, metaphysically so, not a thing, i.e. towards noumena, towards inertia. What is missing in the entire scheme of human ignorance, which is so huge and so divine, is the same way we have and live off of and eat from and heat our houses from explosion technology. Yeah? What's the opposite of explosion technology? That would be field tech. We cannot, and Dollard says this, Tesla says this in different manner, we can't understand anything without understanding counter space. Counter space is a silly word. What would be anti-space? Because space has no properties. Space, of course, is the negative image of inertia. What do you think fills the volume of a torus? That negative image of pure potential. What is the complete inversion of pure potential? The complete inversion of pure potential is pure impotency. The conjugate geometry of the entire universe is the hyperboloid and the torus. Torus, of course, is centrifugal force in motion, the geometry of the loss of energy. Just as we say ice would be like the hysteresis or inertia of water, say, for example, would be room temperature, even though that's inaccurate. The dissipation of that energy would then manifest ice, right? Oh, look, we have ice here. It's hard like a rock, and it's cold, and all this other stuff. Well, I'm trying to use it's not a perfect analogy, but it's kind of close, one people could wrap their minds around, because magnetism is the dielectric field. In other words, the loss of energy or inertia of the dielectric manifests the toroidal geometry that we call magnetism, the centrifugal force in motion geometry of the torus, i.e. the loss of energy or inertia, the manifestation of heat. This is amperage, which kills, not voltage. Yeah, you can get hit with 1,000,000 volts as long as it's low amperage. You can get hit with 5 volts, but if it's high amperage, then you're through. Psh! Be time to bury you. Understanding field theory is very simple, and these have geometries. In Mother Nature, the hairy armpit chick with dreadlocks and hemp skirt and muddy feet that she is very simple. Yet human beings are that ignorant. These three geometries are really one geometry. The hyperboloid and the torus are the negative image of one another. One is the geometry of increasing inertia and acceleration, the center of which there is nothing. The torus is the geometry of loss of energy or inertia manifesting as a centrifugal force vector, which manifests space, the center of which there is absolutely nothing. The superimposition of both of these, each one is a negative image of another. The superimposition of both of these collectively is the same geometry we see of the lowest pressure mediation, just like a bubble. I love it when some of these flatties, as I call them, the people that think the Earth is shaped like a pancake, I say, why don't you go blow a bubble? Go show me, take a picture. Give you $1,000,000. Take me a picture of a pancake-shaped soap bubble. Why is the soap bubble spherical? Because it's the lowest pressure mediation given inside pressure and outside pressure of the air. This is the same thing with mass. Lowest pressure mediation, mutual mass acceleration, of course, is a sphere. Don't you find it curious and interesting that these three geometries, which make up the totality of the entire universe, yeah, are the geometries of every field, and all fields are one thing, just ether perturbation modalities. Negative image of torus, hyperboloid, and vice versa, and the superimposition of both is a sphere. At the center of gravity, there is no gravity. The center of a magnetic field, there is no magnetic flux. The center of absolute true center of inertia is absolutely nothing. Rest. What would be the rest state or an inertia analogy of light? Because nobody has ever seen light, by the way. People never see light, they see illumination. It would be a light bulb attached to a lossless battery. In other words, the battery would retain all of its charge after a gazillion years, which doesn't exist. But light's definition, of course, would be that light bulb attached to a lossless battery. When I see anything is totally dark, that would be light. This is the true definition of inertia. It has no Cartesian value. It has no transverse component. By the way, the three-dimensional manifestation, just like light is a transverse coaxial circuit, transverse electrical magnetic with a given frequency and wavelength, the three-dimensional force vector of the loss of energy or inertia of the dielectric in three-dimensional extrapolation is a torus. If we could look at light three-dimensionally, we would actually see a necklace of tiny little toruses. Isn't that neat? Where there is ether rarefaction, there is manifestation of the the transverse electrical magnetic. Nikola Tesla accurately says, by the way of light, he said light can be nothing other than a longitudinal disturbance of the ether. And this is accurate. There is only water. Yeah, we all know of ice. Well, loss or rarefaction in an analogous crude sense of the energy, i.e. the temperature of water, would of course manifest as ice. The coaxial circuit that we look at relative to light, the rarefaction thereof, not the compression, the inverse of compression is rarefaction. The loss of energy or inertia manifests as transverse electrical magnetic, which is an incomplete torus. All frequency of the EMF spectrum, all the way from radio, all the way through gamma, visible light, ultraviolet, X-ray, so on and so forth, is an incomplete torus. This makes Mother Nature really, 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 really simple. Yet human beings can't see the totality of what is very divinely simple. And it is divinely simple. It's divinely simple beyond the reckoning of most people, but if you could actually see it, it's incredibly divine. It's to see it in its completion, not with mental cogitation and thoughts, but just to see it for what it is, as it is, timeless, without beginning and without end, is absolutely awe-inspiring. And I mean that literally. It is incredibly awe-inspiring. So if you could think about these three geometries and the fact that the center of all these geometries, there is nothing. Not nothing in an absolutist sense of nihilo, as I mentioned before, but not a thing, not phenomena. What is the inverse of phenomena? Everybody's heard the word phenomena. There are very few people that have heard the word noumena. And it's just a silly word in reference to metaphysics. Just as wisdom is a silly word in reference to self-proximity. Not this existential self, but the transcendent self. What would be the lack of frequency, the loss of energy? This is how Nikola Tesla, by the way, figured out scalar energy, which the U.S. military currently uses in some of its technology, but we'll not talk about that here. By the way, as one last comment, human beings do live on the plane of inertia, and everybody loves to talk about the plane of inertia. I've made countless videos about it. I've written endlessly about the plane of inertia. A lot of people try to hijack that idea from me to support this idea that the Earth is shaped like a pancake, which is really ridiculous. But the lowest field pressure zone of the superimposition of the magnetic and the dielectric, respectively the hyperboloid and the torus, the lowest pressure zone of the fight, if you will. Say you have two entities that are fighting, yeah? Kind of like where like parents are fighting or something, kids retreat to their room and go under the covers. Well, under the covers, between the fight between the field geometries in opposition, even though they're one and the same thing, loss of energy, the return to energy, i.e. the return to inertia, the lowest pressure mediation is that the plane that exists at the plane of inertia would be like right here. We'd actually see this in spiral arm galaxies. The galaxies would be right here. You'll actually see the bulbous formation of the emission of trillions of tons of hydrogen of the black holes that are at the center of these spiral arm galaxies. There are many, many actual images, not computer generation images, of these bulbs that exist on either side of the spiral arm galaxies. And all life exists at the plane of inertia, but this plane of inertia is nothing other than the lowest pressure zone, the lowest fight, if you will, to make a really crude analogy, between these respective geometries of the magnetic and the dielectric, i.e. the geometry of force and motion and the geometry of inertia and acceleration. This is the geometry of inertia and acceleration. Of course, the torus is the geometry of force and motion. And the lowest pressure between that is this plane of inertia. This in no way gives support to this pancake Earth silliness. I don't care what people believe. Adults are no different than children. They've all got their little teddy bears of beliefs. I believe in yes, and by God, don't you ever tell me otherwise. You know, you never take a teddy bear from a little child because they're going to kick and scream and be upset at you. Human beings are no different than children. Most of them, anyway. They have all sorts of silly little beliefs, the things that bring them comfort. And, you know, let them hold on to their teddy bear because, you know, life is tragic and full of hell and suffering, and it's hard to deal with, and everybody's got their own little beliefs, and it makes them happy, like little kids and their teddy bears. I'm not about plucking teddy bears out of anybody's arms, so whatever people believe, I don't care. But that doesn't mean I will support nonsense and rubbish and all forms of hooey and ridiculousness. You know, one must remain logical, sensible, realistic, and grounded. And ground is not shaped like a pancake. But anyway, think about those three geometries, because of the three geometries, and these three geometries are one geometry. Think about those three geometries and ask yourself what it says about the universe that the center of all these three geometries, there is nothing. There is not that thing. At the center of the hyperboloid, what makes up either lobe, I'm going to talk about that here, what makes up either one of these lobes, it is not there. At the center of a donut or a torus, the center of which, what makes up the donut, is not there. At the center of a sphere of gravity, or at the, you know, the center of which, that which makes up the sphere, is not there. That tells you, using simplex retroduction, the nature of the universe, the nature of Mother Nature. It is really that simple. But it is unfortunate that human beings are that ignorant, and we're still in love with that type of ignorance. Anyway, my email's in the description below. If you ever like these videos, any donations are always warmly welcome. Send me an email, tell me how much you hated this video. My email's also too below. Lux Veritas, Happy New Year. I'm going to go drink some coffee and have deep thoughts about an article that I'm writing. Past 2 days have been rather hellish. Honestly, nothing like freezing to death all day up in an unheated cabin. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. At least I was in nature, breathing fresh, clean air, though, I guess. So, you gotta look on the bright side. Thank you.